Hey guys, it's nerdnic, and this is the second part of my How to Design Foam Board Airplanes tutorial. Now for those of you who watched along the first one, we covered kind of the basics of Illustrator, the tools we'll be using, and then this is the basics of how to use the program. We also covered how to select your reference image and get started here. So if you haven't watched that, please jump in to the first video before you watch this one. Now before we start designing, I want to talk about a couple things. One, I've posted my video as well as the highlights and then the overview of the commands that we used in the first video here on this blog post. I'll go ahead and leave a link in the description, but check that out just so you don't miss anything, and you can use it as a reference to go back and look at so you don't maybe have to watch the whole video again. I'll be doing this for each part of the series moving forward. And one thing to note as well is this is where the template file is going to live for the time being. So once this video is posted, I should have this link updated. Now, a lot of you guys had some feedback for me. Now, this is just from YouTube, but I got some emails and stuff as well. But I wanted to just quickly talk about some of this. One of the things that came up by Ritual was he asked, why am I not using a 3D modeling program? Because ultimately he feels using 2D is outdated. And I have to say, I do not disagree. 3D modeling is much more powerful and can do way more cool stuff than what I know how to do and what I'll be doing. And so if you do know how to 3D model, you should definitely use that program. What I'm teaching you here, at least the basics will work, but how the program works is going to be on you. I just haven't learned a 3D modeling software yet. It's funny because just 2 years ago when I made the first tutorial, I was getting the same feedback around, why are you using a raster program? Why aren't you using Illustrator? Why aren't you using Vector? And I was like, no, it's fine, I'll figure it out. And they were totally right. Using a vector program like Illustrator is so much faster, so much better. Now, one thing though I will say is I don't know that I disagree, or I don't fully agree that he thinks you could actually design it in less time if you're using a 3D program. I don't know. I mean, using Illustrator, especially with my templates, I can spin this plane out in probably like 2 hours. I could give you a set of plans that would build and work. So I don't know that it's necessarily probably faster to use 3D, though it's probably easier to do certain things. But I don't know about the speed. I think you definitely can get to where you need to go with a 2D program, and it'll be a very beautiful plane as well as very nice performing plane without too much effort. And so if you know 3D, do it. I probably will be rebuilding the series again in 2 years with a 3D program, so Ritual, watch out for that. But for any of those of you that are using a 2D program and want to learn with me, then please continue to do that. Last thing I want to talk about before we start the next part of the series is just to cover a couple people that do design with 3D so you can see kind of what's going on or what's possible. Local Fiend on the forum uses 3D modeling to build his designs. Spawns, who draws all the plans for Flight Test. Though, as a side note, Flight Test uses Corral. They do not use 3D, so that's actually another option to use between Inkscape and Illustrator if you wanted to get a more modest priced tool that does work. All the Flight Test planes are designed using Corel Draw. But yeah, Spawns does all the drawings for Flight Test, and he does his own designs using 3D modeling software. Another guy, RCF Bearcraft, he's on the forums, and he has a bunch of beautiful planes. You should check him out. He does 3D modeling, and his planes are just beautiful. And then the last one is Flying Foam, which used to be Beyond the Wheel RC. He also does 3D modeling, and he's got a beautiful P61 black widow that you should check out if you're interested in that kind of plane. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump in here to the design section. So in this part of the series, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the beginnings of doing your outlines for the different pieces for your wing, for your vertical stabilizer, for your horizontal stabilizer, for the fuselage. And then I'm going to kind of speed it up so you don't have to sit here and watch me for 20 minutes do all of the tracing. But I'm going to call out all the key areas so you know what to look out for and what to focus on while you're doing your outline. Okay? So for the first thing, I always start with the wing just because I like to. You don't have to. You can start wherever, but we're going to start with the wing today. And we're going to start with the line tool. And what I'm going to do is make sure on the right hand side I am in the new layer that I'm using, not this locked layer, which is the image. So I'm in the new layer. I've already got that test line that I had put up there, so I know I'm on the right spot. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit, and on this leading edge I'm going to draw a straight line starting at right about where the curve would be. And now I usually try to the best I can, depending on the wing shape, line this up with where the aileron ends, if possible. If it doesn't, it's totally fine, it doesn't matter, but it's just something that makes the inside bevel line a little easier later. But for this one, it's about right, so I'll start right about here. I'm going to click and hold with my left mouse, and I'm going to drag. Now, if you'll notice, this has a weird curve in the leading edge, and this is actually not possible to accomplish on foam board as a foldover as one piece. You have to come back and add this as a second piece. So this part that curves here, this is going to have to come as a like an attachment, right? So for this, if you have a plane that has a bend like this, you know, leading forward, then just skip it. You want to actually grab your line. And now, on that note, before I don't want to redraw this, if I click the A key, so I want to do the direct selection tool, I can actually grab the end of this line. Illustrator will show this little anchor piece here, which at the end of any line will have this. Well, anything we draw moving forward will have an anchor point at the beginning and end of that path. I can grab that because this is we use the straight line tool, and I can move it, right? So I can totally stretch it around. Now, if you notice, I just picked up the whole thing. The other thing, again, if I do A, so I have A selected, but I don't have the line selected, and then I just go and grab the line, now I'm actually stretching it. You see that? So if I have the line selected and I have the direct selection tool, I will pick up the whole line and move it, even if I grab the edge sometimes. But if it's not selected and you grab the anchor, it will always just stretch it. That's a little tip there. So, and the newer versions of Illustrator actually show you your previous line. So when I have it placed there, if I move it, you can still see where the line was, and it'll lock onto it. If you're like wanting to make it longer or whatever, where it turns purple like that, it means it's still locked on to the same degree or angle that you were. So you can make it shorter or longer without changing the angle of the line. That's kind of cool. But yeah, so you can see the old reference line of where you were, and then you can make your adjustment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend this past this curve right to the center of the plane. Now if you're drawing, or your 3D doesn't have this line in the middle of the plane, I would recommend going and adding it. Okay, you should probably grab the center, make a line just so you have that point, and this just helps with the alignment later. In this case I have one, so I'm going to undo that, and I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so I've got it to about the center here. I'm on the leading edge, I like that. And now I'm going to grab my pen tool, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, because we're going to make this first curve. And the way the pen tool works is kind of interesting. It's going to be something that you definitely have to practice. It will not come naturally initially. But just as a quick overview of how it works, so you have an idea, is you start by clicking an anchor point, and I don't have to hold. I just click once, and now I have a free, line that's forming here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to right about here, and I'm only going this far because I kind of know how to use the tool, so it just makes sense. You can only do certain things with it. There's limitations, and this will be a kind of a feel thing that you're used to. But I go to about the wing tip where the widest point is. And now I'm going to click and hold, so I click my mouse and hold, and now if I drag my mouse down, and the way I try to remember this is I'm going to kind of drag it in the direction where the line would go. Let's say if you watch my mouse, if I were to be drawing the line, I would kind of follow around the curve. I'm going to kind of move my mouse as if I was doing that drawing, okay? And you'll see the shape starts to form. If I do the other way, it bends this way. If I do it really out, it bends out like that. If I bend it straight down, it bends as well. But essentially I'm going to kind of follow where is the immediate next part of my line going to be. Now in this one it's kind of down actually, right after the point here it kind of goes down and then it curves. So I'm going to keep my mouse kind of in that slightly angled fashion, and I'm going to pull it straight down until my curve matches the reference line. Okay? If I hold shift, it'll jump to the 90 degree like we talked about with the line tool, as well as the 45 or the 180, right? So I'm going to hold down shift. In some cases, if it's a perfectly flat line, or my reference line is then a flat piece, let's say the curve buds up to a flat piece, then you'll hold shift to try and lock that in. So I'm gonna now let go of my mouse, and now I've drawn that line. Now, one thing too is with this pen tool, the second line that you do, it tries to auto curve it. Now sometimes this works, right? Where if I kind of trace my mouse around the reference, I can see, look, that almost lines up perfect, right? So I can then just click again, and it finishes my line. Now the one really cool thing about doing that, about doing the second curve, so once you do your first line, if you let it keep curving, is this joint right here, that second anchor point that was created, will always be smooth. No matter what your next angle is, so if I did some crazy angle over here, over here, over here, this joint right here is always going to be smooth. If you do not do that, if you when you do your first line, if you do not let that follow and you start over, you break off and you grab a new line, then this joint can actually be kind of rough. So if I start here and make my curve or whatever, this joint can be it won't be smooth because you have to figure it out. So if you do break off and do that, it's very, very difficult, but sometimes it's required to then make that line smooth, because now I'm not watching my beginning point, or sorry, my new anchor. I'm watching this original one, and I'm trying to make that line smooth, right? Otherwise your transition is going to be noticeable, and you don't want it to be noticeable. You want that to be nice and smooth. Okay, so just something to note there. In this case, I could extend that anchor and keep bending. Other times you will not be able to just start over. And what I do, once you've started your pen tool on that second one, to get off of it, to break off and start over, just press the A key, which brings you to your select tool, and then you can go back with your pen tool and finish it off. Okay? That's how you'd break free from that. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and keep going here. This one came out real nice. The corner, or the pen tool, did a nice curve there. And now I'm going to find till the where the curve stops, which visually looks about here. So I'm going to grab my anchor, move, or click on my anchor, and continue with my pen tool till right about when I hit the flat section, which is about here. So now again, I'm going to stretch my line as if I were continuing to draw, right? Because that means I'm going to set up the path to be where it's supposed to keep going, so that my next anchor point is a smooth transition. If I bend it, then I'm creating a very sharp point here to try and clean up. So I'm going to extend my tool along the line I'm going, and then I'm going to watch this anchor point, the one I first hooked onto, to try and make this look smooth. Because if I do it too sharp, it bubbles out. If I do it not enough, then it dips in, right? So this part is kind of where it's a feel thing, and you can mess around. So let's say I did it too strong. I do that, and it's clearly too sharp, right? That looks awful. I can actually go back with my select tool A and click on just this one path, right? This new one, and I have my little stretcher back. And I can actually adjust it. That looks a lot better. And one of the things, just in general about this tool, is that the more you stretch it, the longer you stretch it, what happens is, if you watch the curve, right, if I'm doing a straight line, the curve initially starts at the point of the second anchor, right? So this kind of looks like an airfoil where I'm at the leading edge right now. If I stretch it more, I push the curve back. So now I have like a reversed airfoil. You see that? So the more you stretch it, you change the position of the curve. So if you wanted it to be like right in the middle, you'd have to kind of do a 45-degree angle. You see that? That's just something, again, you have to play around with this. It becomes really easy once you've done it a bit. You can do this really fast. It takes just a few seconds to draw this when you've gotten comfortable with it. Alright, so we've got that part. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and now we're going to go ahead and finish this straight line, because it's almost always a straight trailing edge. And so I'm going to find my anchor point. I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to draw to the point where, if you notice, there's a purple line that just appeared. What that purple line is telling me is I am at the same axis now as that top line up here. I'm at the same depth. And so if I let go, then these will be perfectly in line, right? One on top of the other, which I want. I don't want the bottom to extend out or be too short. So this is a really cool, quick tool, this auto snapping piece that we're going to be using a lot throughout this series. So that little purple line tells me you're good to go. So I let go now, and I can actually come back up here and then draw this. And again, when I'm moving my line, it's purple, right? One, because it's in line with that next anchor point. It's telling me I am good with this bottom or another anchor point. It doesn't matter what what anchor point, just some anchor point I'm lined up with, and it'll usually draw a line to tell you where that is. So I'll go down here, hit the anchor, let go, and now I have a outlined wing. Pretty straightforward, right? So what I want to do now is take my select tool, drag a box around all these pieces, and I see over here now I have those lines, those paths highlighted. If I do Ctrl G, it's going to put them in a group, and then I'm going to double click and I'm going to type in wing. So now I have the outline of my wing ready to go. Go ahead and zoom out. And to do the next part, just out of preference, I'm going to turn this image. I'm actually going to copy it and make another layer, but I'm going to turn it so that I can see the fuselage kind of running normal. It makes it a little easier for me to visually, kind of perceive it. So we are going to unlock this layer. I'm going to select it with this tool. I'm going to do Ctrl C for copy, and then I'm going to do a Ctrl paste. Now put another image in this layer, which is fine, but I need to turn it. So I'm going to hit V, which is the full select tool, or the selection tool, and now I'm going to hold Shift, go to the corner, click and rotate. So now I've just turned it on its side. So now I can design this part of the plane, the fuselage. Okay. Now to do that, I'm going to again relock this whole layer so I can't move this stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. Now on this one, we're going to do the same thing with the pen tool. We're going to go ahead and bend the curve. I'm going to go right to where the leading edge meets the plane for now, but that's actually not where it's going to go, because if you remember, if I looked at the side view, that would be up here, and that's not where our wing's going to go. Our wing's going to go pretty significantly in, but for right now, I'm just going to use that as a reference point, and then I'm going to skip everything so it's going to be empty, and I'm going to start where the wing hits the fuselage, which in this plane, again, it has a wing root fairing, so it's going to look like it's further. I'm going to jump it in the amount that I have measured here. Okay, so I'm going to measure how much I have selected, or distance in, sorry, by clicking here, holding down my pen tool, or sorry, my line tool, and looking at my little measuring tape. So it looks like 2.27 centimeters is how much it's in. So I'm going to go to where it looks like it hits, which is here, go in 2.27, right about there. And now I'm going to stop the wing at that point. And then I'm going to keep tracing the bottom up to where the rudder is. So the rudder is going to be kind of the end point. And then I'm going to go straight up. So I'm going to quickly do that part, and then we'll jump into what the next step is. Okay? So go ahead and get your fuselage traced up to that point. Okay, so now we've got it added, or the lines up to the point of where the stabilizer is. What I like to do for this is I like to draw a line right in the middle, kind of cutting the stabilizer in half, because that's about where we're going to put our stabilizer right later. So just as a reference, I want to know where it sits, and I always do it in the middle, so I just know that's where it's going to sit. If you put the piece, the foam on top of this now, it'll be a little bit high, so later we can adjust this down or whatever we're going to do. Because we're going to decide later if you're going to do a single sheet thickness on your stabilizers or a double sheet. So for right now, just do your reference line there in the middle. Then you're going to grab this line, use your selection tool, your direct selection tool, grab this anchor, and then stretch it up. So now we have a flat piece there. So one thing to note about this line is you can't just extend it out. See, if I were to do that, you can see that this height where the stabilizer is going to go is actually higher than the nose of the airplane, and that doesn't leave any room for us to do any curved top of the fuselage to give it that nice shape. Because as you know, we're working with flat foam, and this is going to be folded up, and you're going to have formers on top. So this kind of causes a problem. So how do we deal with this? Well, one of the things that you need to decide is how much curve do you actually want, and then these formers are there to help you understand how much you really need for it to get kind of a scale look. Because what you don't want is you don't want the sidewall of the airplane to come up, and then you don't want like a sharp curve where you can see that joint. You don't want to see the joint between the fuselage foam sidewall and then where the poster board or whatever kind of meets that curve. You want that to be a smooth transition. So you need to provide enough height on the formers to do that. So how do you figure that out? Well, what I like to do is I like to take one of my formers and kind of quickly design it, right? So I'm going to grab from the center of it, I'm going to come down to about here. I'm just quickly, this isn't perfect, it doesn't matter though, and I'm going to go like that. Okay, so that now I have kind of the shape of my former. And if I look, that one's cut right here. So if I bring this down and kind of put it where it would be, so the center of it is right where it would go, right? So the plane is sliced right here. This is the center of it, just to show you. So that's how it's lined up. Now, when I look at this, I can tell now on this former, when does it kind of stop curving, right? Most of these airplanes are similar shape, where the sidewall is generally flatter. The nose will be round, but the sides are usually pretty flat. So there's a point where it stops curving and kind of goes flat. That's the point where you want to bring the sidewall up to on your airplane. So for this one, it's right about here. So if I look at this, just as I'm just going to guess now, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to start above my first anchor point. I'm going to click and hold now, and I'm going to drag back. What I'm doing is I'm creating what could be our top line. Okay, so if I look at this, I keep going back. Yeah, that makes sense, because one of the things that you'll notice is that at no other point does it look like we won't have enough space. Some airplanes, their tail section right back here will cut down really far, in which case this line, that top line you drew here, may have to end short and then drop down a little bit, right? So you can come over. Now, this case, that's not the case here, right? Because this is actually has a pretty high tail. But just so you know, this line, you want to be able to extend it back as best you can. Now, in other planes, when you're extending it back, you'll notice that you can't go very far because there's something else on the airplane or whatever. So go to the point. Usually what I like to do is about where the wing went in, and just hang out there. Don't worry about stretching it all the way, but you definitely want to go to about where the wing or the cockpit ends, right? The canopy ending is about as far as you need to take this right this second, okay? So we've got that there. I'm going to get rid of the other lines because they don't matter. That one as well, this one as well. The only other thing I'll do usually before I determine is this the right line, is I'll make sure when I look at this visually, will the motor sit in the right spot? Now, as much as you can, you want it to look scale, right? So if this was what I decided as the final piece, then my motor is actually going to sit, you know, if I looked at this right about in the middle of this, right, it's going to sit right about there, based on how the pod works or whatever. Like this would be what you have available. If I look at the scale picture, it's about right. It's about right in the middle. So the motor placement is also going to be accurate. It's not going to be too high or too low. If it is high or low, it usually doesn't change a whole lot. It will look different, and if it's really extreme, you will fly different because you're changing your thrust line, which is important relative to the wing and the tail and everything. But for most of the planes I've designed, you can line it up to where it fits, it works, it makes sense. Okay. Other thing, just to quickly, make reference so you can look at your plane, because some planes are different, is I checked this former, right, and this line would have been fine. I got good curve. I'll just visually look at the next formers and see, do any of them have a crazy shape that would be impacted by this? Because if they do, if one of your shapes is really round and this line is too high to where you would lose that shape, then you need to drop it down for all of them. You just got to commit to going lower so that you can get the proper shape throughout the whole plane. Okay, so eyeball your plane, make sure you figure that out. And actually, I'm going to drop this down a little bit more, only because I know at the nose, even though this section is fine and the rest look like they'll be fine, the nose itself, now this at about 1 centimeter is not enough. So what ends up happening is the nose looks kind of squished. And one of the planes that I know looks like this is like the FT Spitfire. It has a really nice curve up by the canopy, and the nose is flattened where you can definitely see the sidewall that makes it look more square. I don't like that, so I'm going to actually move this whole line down a little bit more, just so I know I get a nice curve on the nose. And now an easy way to do that is if I use my so I'm going to do my direct selection tool. I'm going to draw a little box around the items that I want to move, so this line and this line. But not this bottom anchor point, I'm just moving this top anchor point. If I use my arrow keys now and press down, I can move it all together. And I'm going to go right about to there. Okay? Now, if I did that same thing, but I had this anchor point selected as well, I actually would move the whole line. You see that? It's another little tip for you there. So that looks good. And now for the tail section, I'm going to leave this because this piece, actually, yeah, we don't know yet for sure. We have to do the top one before we can do that. But before we leave here, I want to make sure I group all this stuff. So I'm going to drag a box around this and do Ctrl G and name that fuselage. And this line I'm going to get rid of because we don't want that one anymore. That was our very first line that we used to make sure our color was right. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the vertical stabilizer now. Same thing, guys. Use your pen tool, trace it. Any straight lines, use your line tool if you can. And we're going to go ahead and outline this. And I'm going to go right to this point where the rudder is. And then I'm going to stop right around here where the fuselage kind of starts. Okay, and we'll do all the connection stuff later. But we're going to get the outline going for now. Okay, so we've got to this point, and now what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the layer that's the fuselage here. So I'm going to go ahead and click this button here, the eye, just so I don't see it. And I'm just getting out of the way because it makes it easier here to connect this. So I got to right to the point of here, which is where the fuselage also connects. And now I'm going to draw up to get my rudder. So I'm going to click, drag up, and I'm going to connect it to the other path, which is right about there. So now I've got my rudder. And then I'm going to do one thing here. I know that I'm using foam that is a certain thickness. In this case, it's going to be about 5 millimeters, or it's true about 0.47 centimeters, or 47 millimeters is about what it is. Now, to account for that, one of the things I do now is I know that this is where my bottom sheet of foam is going to be for the fuselage, right? So what I like to do is I like to come up the thickness of the foam, just like that. And now I like to draw out this way, because this is kind of the bottom piece of my stabilizer now. Now I'll adjust this later, but it at least gives me a point of where I know that's where this is going to end. So it looks like that now. Okay, so I've got that piece, and now I'm going to go ahead and select all that and group it, Ctrl G, and name it vstab. And that's done for now. If you want, you can add the trim tab. I like to do that too sometimes, but it's not required. Let me show you a quick thing here. If you're using these paths, you can't easily remove it, right? So let me show you an example. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the trim tab here. Just real rough. Oops. Okay, that's my trim tab. And now you ultimately want to get rid of this center line because it's not needed anymore. Now to do that, I like to go over here, right click on the pen tool and go to this add anchor point. I click it really close to the previous anchor point. I select the center and delete. And now I can actually grab this anchor point and I can stretch it back. Now when I do that though, I do change the angle of this line just slightly, but if you do it close enough, it's not so bad. You can always go back and adjust it, if you needed to. We'll do the same thing on the other side. Go ahead and move that down. Oops, I didn't delete the right one. There we go. Move that down. Just double check my line, and it's a little bit now, so I'll just straighten it. There we go. There, and now you've got your trim tab. And then go ahead and do your selection tool, drag a box around that. And then now what I like to do is select these lines over here with shift. So I click one, hold shift, click the other. It selects everything in between. I can now drag that into vstab. And now I have everything in one piece. Alright, there's that. And now we need to go ahead and do our vertical or horizontal stabilizer. Now to do that, I am going to again start with my line tool, go to the center on the leading edge, and get the rest of this thing traced. Okay, now that we have half of it done, we're going to go ahead and add our hinge line here. And now if you're, depending on what way you want to design, I've been using these dual surfaces method, where each part of the elevator is actually a separate piece of control, so they're not connected, left and right. If you want to connect them, don't do a full trace here. You actually want to add a center section that's going to join between them. so you don't have to go take it all the way down to the hinge line. The distance here I would highly recommend is making this part as thick as possible. So about an inch is what I would say, if you can do it. If you make this too thin, where each of the where the two elevators join, then this part will stress and fatigue and break, and so your control horn will be here pressing this surface, and then the other surface over here will not deflect because this piece gets too weak. Okay, so make sure you as best you can make this area thick. Again, I recommend probably about an inch if possible to do that. We'll talk about some other things later when we join the tail feathers about what to account for, but for now I am not going to do that because I do the individual control surfaces. So once I have the halfway point done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of it. I'm going to do Control Copy, so that's Control C and then a Control V, and now I have it exact copy. I'm going to press the V tool to select the whole thing, and then right click, Transform, Reflect. And this gives me the option to flip it vertical or horizontal. I want to flip it vertical like this image shows. So it flips it over. And now if I turn off my back image, I can grab this, again with the V tool. So I grab the whole thing. And now you see these purple lines that show up? If I line it up visually, you should see it lock on with that purple line. And then I bring them closer together, and then it should lock again, saying now they are squared. Those are now perfectly symmetrical. And then I'm going to finish off by drawing this line here. Oops, went too far. Anchor to anchor. I'm going to select this all, and I'm going to do a Ctrl G. And now I have my hstab. Alright guys, that's it for right now. We've covered how to do your initial outlines of your wing, your fuselage, your vertical stabilizer, and your horizontal stabilizer. In the next video, we're going to bring in the templates and really wrap these things up to look like real parts. So I hope you guys found this informative. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I'd love to engage with you. I answer and read every single question, so please let me know your feedback. As always guys, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.